it's time for our first panel of the day, which is depot electrification at scale, infrastructure, planning and delivery. So if I could ask our expert speakers to join us for the panel. We have Mark Gilks from Envivo, Ellen Williams from SP Energy Networks, John Jessen, Motors Commercials, and Leo Pickford, TransitionWise. Let's start. I'll just ask everybody to just say a few words by way of introduction. Mark, if we can start with you.
Yeah, good morning all. Mark Gilks, Business Development Manager at Envivo. I've been with Envivo about 13 months now into the EV space. Prior to that, I've worked in the alternative fuel sector for the last 15 years, covering a number of fuels from biomethane right the way through to hydrogen. Pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you. John.
Morning all. My name's John Jessen. I'm the EV and Connected Services Manager for Motors Commercials. Motors Commercials is the biggest DAF dealership in the UK. We've got 34 depots nationwide, and one of those being in Wrexham.
Morning all, it's Leo Pickford. I'm the founder of TransitionWise. We help heavy goods vehicle companies and other logistics businesses to electrify, and also work with Blue Lights.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me today. I'm Ellen Williams. I'm the Connections Intelligence Lead at SP Energy Networks. So we run the distribution network across Manweb, so Merseyside and North Wales, and also up in southern and central Scotland as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us here today at Moving to Zero. Just before we get into the panel, I just want to ask John a really quick question, because I asked you this earlier and it always blows my mind. So you very, very kindly brought for today a DAF electric demo truck. What's the range of that vehicle?
So that particular vehicle out there has got the 5-pack batteries, says 500 kilometres on that one. Obviously, it depends on payload and terrain, but I'll cover a bit of that in later on in the session. So.
Amazing, because that's about 350 miles, isn't it?
Absolutely.
All in, yeah.
And we've got real-world data on that as well. So these vehicles are out there running now, they're with customers. We've got 9 demos, different configurations. So if anyone wants to try one, you're more than welcome to. So.
Yeah, my first electric car, second-hand Nissan Leaf, back in whenever, barely achieved 100 miles. Be lucky to get 90, and we've got this massive vehicle out there, 350 miles. I think the progress is incredible. Anyway, let's get back to the panel. So Mark, we'll start with you. First question. So from an infrastructure delivery perspective, what are the biggest challenges when moving depot electrification from design into reality?
I think probably moving from design to reality, there's a number of elements behind that. The big thing around it is, do you have power to site through the DNO connection? So a lot of work behind that needs to go into play very early doors in terms of speaking to the DNO, finding out, do you have capacity on site? If not, how do we get capacity through to the site? Does it involve upgrades behind it? So that's a really sort of key element in regards to what we do for moving from design to implementation, is a very early stages, making sure that that's in place. Also looking at the depot, dwell times behind that as well. Is there space on site to actually land the likes of substations to move things forward? So for us side of things, it's really making sure that capacity is there and obviously involving the likes of the DNO from a very, very early stage.
Thank you so much, Mark. And that is an absolutely beautiful segue into my first question, I think, for Ellen from SP Energy Networks, of course, distribution network operator. So, Ellen, what challenges do DNOs face when fleet operators seek grid connections for depot electrification? And how can fleets better plan ahead to ensure they have capacity that they actually need?
I think Mark actually covered a few bits earlier. So from a DNO perspective, one of the biggest challenges is almost like the scale and concentration of demand that comes from fleet's electrification. So depot charging can require a significant increase in load, and in many cases the local network it wasn't designed previously to accommodate to that level of demand. And what we often see is that the capacity maybe isn't available in certain locations locally, which means reinforcement is needed on the network, either on the distribution network or further upstream, sometimes at transmission, national grid level. And that's where things become more complex, because the scope of work can vary quite significantly. But at the simpler end, if there's capacity available and there's no major constraints, you might be looking at around a year to deliver a connection, typically something like a standard 11 kV secondary substation. But where reinforcement is required, timelines can extend to several years, and that's driven not just by kind of engineering works, but also that wider factors like planning permission, land rights, supply chain availability, and the coordination around outage planning as well to get the works going. Another challenge is uncertainty in future demand. So, fleet operators, the technology and the plans evolve quite quickly as well. So there's really big ambitions, which is great, but it does make it more challenging to plan for the future for DNOs. So we're also kind of seeing increasing pressure from other sources as well. But in terms of how fleet operators can plan ahead, Mark mentioned early engagement is absolutely critical for us. The earlier we can have those conversations, the better it is. We can understand the requirements, flag potential constraints, and explore solutions in partnership and together before any plans are fixed. So, yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Ellen. And I think we're going to hear later on in the day, actually, from a company that may have some solutions, actually, to I don't know whether it's right to say circumvent the connection challenge, but certainly there are things that can be done. John, let's come to you from the dealer perspective. Where should operators start, and how do you help them connect vehicle choice with the right charging and depot strategy from day one?
From a lot of our customers, the first thing they say to me is, where do we start, or how do we charge these vehicles? So essentially what we do, we look at the operational needs of that company, and we configure a vehicle to those needs, and we refine that configuration, such as battery packs, with carrying out route simulations. So those route simulations, we input the postcodes of the routes, we can put payload in there where it's diminishing, coming back empty, EPTO usage, if they're using cranes, using fridges, all of that takes away from the range. So essentially, once we've worked that route sim out, which takes out the routes with obviously the terrain, the hills, ambient temperature, we can see if that vehicle will make it around that route or not. If it can, we in some cases can suggest where it can stop and even for how long for it to charge. So we always recommend that vehicle gets back on around about 20% a state of charge. And then essentially from that we can look at a charging strategy. So depending on, Naomi touched on it earlier, saying about different phases of charging infrastructure, what vehicles are you looking to run? How many are you looking to run in the first few years? How big do you go? How do you future-proof that site? My advice would always be do as much as you can now, even if it's just putting ducting into the ground. It will save you money later on. So essentially, when you find out what capacity charger, so what kilowatt charger, the higher the output, the more infrastructure you're going to need to run that charger. So if I was to say to you, we've got customers now running vehicles on 22 kilowatt AC chargers, and 40 kilowatt chargers even. So just for a comparison, that vehicle outside, if I wanted to charge it on a 40 kilowatt charger using a 63 amp supply, we can charge that vehicle from 20 to 100% in 10.5 hours, which works. If the vehicle's, the duty cycle's low, no problem. Alternatively, we can charge that vehicle at 325 kilowatts, and that's 1.2 hours. From 20 to 100%. So essentially, once we find out what charger suits your operation at that time, we work with installation partners. Well, one of them is actually in Vivo. They've done 11 projects for us. And essentially, we hand you over to them, we'll introduce you, and they know what they're doing. This is their trade, this is what they do. So They can come and do a survey. They look at where your charge is going to go. They can look at the cable runs. They can look at the spare capacity on site, if there is any. Normally there isn't. Look at the infrastructure outside even. But essentially, they're going to give you an overall plan to install that infrastructure and a cost to do that. So obviously, once we've configured that vehicle, we can give you a cost on the vehicle. We can give you TCO comparisons even. But that's where I believe you start, and obviously, as a DAF dealer, we can help you do that if you need to. So,
Brilliant. Thank you so much, John. We heard from Naomi that actually depot planning is less of a project, but more of a strategic play. So, Leo, what are the biggest strategic mistakes that organisations make when planning depot electrification, in your experience?
Okay, thanks, Jill. The biggest one is really not thinking about power. And I won't mention names of companies, but there are several who have got big into electric trucks. They've got some on order. They've then thought about chargers. They haven't thought about power at all. And that is probably the biggest mistake that I see, because then they'll get into last-minute conversations with their DNA, and it will suddenly be 3 years wait, 5 years wait, and they've got the issue of them vehicles that they can't use, or they have to charge on public chargers. So I'd always say power is absolutely crucial.
And I think that message is kind of, it's really coming through really loud and clear, isn't it? And that early engagement with the DNO is absolutely critical. So Ellen, I suppose kind of keeping on that point a little bit. So at which point should organisations be engaging with the DNO? Clearly it's as soon as possible. And what are the consequences if it's just left too late? And again, we've heard a little bit about that already.
Yeah. So the earlier we understand the project from a DNO perspective, the more options we have to shape an efficient and deliverable solution for our customers. So both in terms of cost and timescales as well. So one of the main ways we support that is through our strategic optimizer team. They work with customers before a formal application is submitted to us. So that really does help us understand the intent, the scale and the phasing and any kind of wider strategic or political drivers behind a project as well. And that's valuable for customers with multiple sites. So without that kind of early coordination, projects often come in as separate applications and get treated individually if you're a multi-site organisation as well that needs chargers on multiple locations. But yeah, sometimes in reality it's part of a bigger programme. So the strategic optimizer team within Sven, they can take that whole programme view and guide customers through the process and enabling our engineers to plan on a coordinated and multi-site basis as well. And yeah, still recognising that the specific nuances of each project individually. They also they also gather some forward-looking intelligence for us that will help future projects. So we've got a documents that we have to submit or upload every year, which is called the Distribution Future Energy Scenarios. So the early intelligence from various projects feeds into this forward-looking planning, and that helps future projects because we have more of a visible view of what projects are coming up and what capacity will be available in further along the lines in upcoming years as well. So yeah, it's as early as possible. It's the main message.
Can I just add something to that as well, Ellen? I think it sounds quite daunting, but you don't have to do it on your own. You can obviously do that in partnership with the likes of Enviva and other organisations out there that can undertake those applications, those processes, work very closely with the DNO. As being a nurses accredited ICP, we understand those complexities behind that and can work very closely with yourselves and with the end user, so it can take away some of those concerns or risks or worries about how do I do this, there are organisations in play in the marketplace that can do that and streamline that process.
Yeah, exactly. And we have designated teams to actually work in partnership with companies like yourselves and guide customers through the process. Like I mentioned earlier, we've got a project with the Liverpool Combined Authority, which they supported recently, which they've installed a few fleet chargers around the Liverpool region, and they really kind of understand more about the political context of that, and that's really helpful. So that they really help to kind of work in partnership, because that's what we like to do. Preferably, it's best for us and also the customers.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Ellen. And I think I really like that you used the word partnership there, because it's something that we're all. I think it's going to be a really common theme of today, isn't it? And solutions as well. So Mark, perhaps putting kind of the challenge of DNO connections, grid capacity aside for a moment. So where else are organisations perhaps underestimating complexity, and what should they be planning for earlier?
I think that goes back to the sort of design point, is understanding utility-wise as well, because obviously you can look at it from the charger point down and obviously say which is the wrong way of doing it. Is obviously, as John alluded to there and previously, talk about from the vehicle what you need, but how do you then develop the infrastructure on site? Are you looking, where are the utilities, where are the power lines, where are the water cables? These can fundamentally stop projects dead because the sort of design processes weren't taken up front. So it's really key to actually make sure that you do take on the topos, the GPRs, you understand where new substations are going to be on site, how's that going to impact space constraints, as we say. Depots previously weren't sort of designed for electrification, so where do you put your substation, where do you put your chargers, how many bays do you lose? These are all key pertinent conversations that can actually impact an operator moving forward. So by having that early thought process behind it, and again on the DNO piece, if power's not available, is there battery energy storage systems that you can bring involved? Is there solar panel sort of PV as well? There's loads of opportunities here now, just not to be determined on grid connections directly, but also how you supplement that too.
Brilliant, thank you, Mark. And I'm really interested in the driver in all of this. So the people who are actually going to be driving these vehicles, and how do you bring those drivers along on the journey if they're a little bit reticent to sort of switch to electric or another alternative fuel type. So John, what are your customers most concerned about when making the switch to electric or alternative fuel trucks, and what's your role? How can you help those drivers feel comfortable with that transition?
Well, there's a couple of questions always get asked. Number one, we've mentioned earlier, how do we charge it? And the other concern is costs. But with the driver point of view, every demo we've actually put out, apart from the range anxiety from people who don't drive electric, everyone has said how fantastic they drive. So that's not really an issue. But if we look at how do we charge it, I think we've already answered that question, the journey we would go through. And Mark, obviously, if we've got power constraints, we can look at BESS systems, we can look at solar. And that landscape has changed recently, really, but there's a lot more products out there now. And then in terms of cost, you've got a couple of schemes out there at the moment. You've got the zero-emission truck grant. So you depend on the weight class of the vehicle, you can get up to 15,000 or 81,000, or 40% of the vehicle cost. Again, depend on that weight class. And another subsidy out there is the depot charging scheme. Where essentially you could get up to £1 million or 70% of the on-site costs for your charging infrastructure. So when you put those two together and you look at a TCO comparison against a diesel, sometimes you're better than parity. So, and we have got some offers at the moment. If anyone was interested to look, I can just show you where we look at the TCO comparison. So,
brilliant. Thank you very much, John. And data is something that's all important in sort of the considerations that you need to make when transitioning a fleet. So, Leo, what role does data play in making the right infrastructure decisions, just building on what sort of John's already said in that regard?
So I would say it's absolutely paramount. Trying to do any of this without data is a disaster. if you ever try doing it from feeding alone. It really comes in as soon as you get going, as soon as you know what your fleet strategy is, or even before that, you can start to look at the big numbers. So, how big is your fleet? When is it coming up for replacements? And so how many, if you know how many vehicles you're going to need, and when, these are sort of really key data points. But I think in the whole journey, the biggest data elements is when you look at what your fleet's doing. So, where is it traveling every day? Where is it stopping? And there are various analysis tools, such as ones we have at TransitionWise. Sorry for the self-plug. We're able to actually look at what your fleet's doing, where it's stopping, and map out all the needs it's going to have to charge. Where is it going to charge? How long for? And how much power is it going to need? I think if you don't have that sort of information, you're sort of walking through the fog in terms of trying to actually do the project. So, quite a long way of saying data is extremely important.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Leo. And before we come to the audience for Q&A, so hopefully you've been thinking of a few questions to ask our panellists. It's going to be quick fire round. Okay. So final question. Ellen, we'll start with you. What's the one change, whether that's technical, commercial, or behavioural, that would unlock depot electrification at scale fastest?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess, it's just encouraging people to engage early, and data is a good point as well. So we've got a flexibility team that you can earn money from supporting the network. So data is really key, and where you're charging and what times you're charging is actually quite good for the future as well. So if you've got if you've already got a connection in place, then you can make money out of actually supporting our network. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ellen. Leo, what's the one thing that's going to unlock depot electrification at scale fastest?
So I think this is something that has, I suppose it's been a blocker for those who have set out on the journey and then they've suddenly stopped. Yeah. So in the boardrooms, the conversation started up, the numbers make sense, it's actually better TCO than diesel, if looking at kind of 5-6 years plus. Great, everything looking good. And then the thing they bump into is actually around site leases. And it's where say your business case is over 5 or 6 years, but your lease is up for renewal in 3. And, you're thinking, well, do I want to put chargers in the ground? Do I want to put solar on the roof? All that sort of thing, when I'm not sure what that means to my lease. And so I really think we need to address that.
Thank you, Leo. John, what's the one thing that would unlock depot electrification at scale fastest?
Thanks for reminding me. What Leo was just saying then, there are BES systems in place now where you can put literally a skid on the floor with chargers already mounted to it. But I think it's the infrastructure. I think the TCO, we're getting there. The constraints from the DNOs, obviously the power is going to hold things, but there is ways around it. So I think each case is different, and I think you go down and investigate to see if that vehicle can do what you want that vehicle to do for your operation, and then essentially there's other options down the road. So don't look at loads of road blockers, because most of them we can get over. So
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Mark.
I kind of echo John's point there. I think looking at it from a holistic position, charging late at night when prices are cheaper, looking at the dwell times behind it, battery integrated solutions behind that as well. Did think of something else. But so I think they're probably the sort of key points behind it. And I think also, if you're looking at new connections, look at asset values as well through an IDNO, because that can add a substantial revenue share back to the organisation as well behind it. And also working with software partners that can provide grid exploitation as well. So if you're not using the power, sell it back to the grid at the appropriate time. And obviously that's a nice revenue stream as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Oh, what, Leo?
I'm going to be naughty and add one thing, which is, don't instantly assume you need a grid upgrade. Yeah, so I would say always start with your energy need, and then how are you going to meet it? Yeah. So is it behind the meter solutions? You know, talk quite a bit about solar, about batteries, software that does clever things. Do all that analysis first, and then you might not need a grid upgrade.
Yeah.
But if you do, it might then be smaller than the one you thought. Yeah. So you're starting the conversation with the DNOs anyway, but you can try and minimise or avoid your grid upgrade, perhaps. So do the analysis first.
Brilliant. Thank you, Leo. Very wise words there. So now it's time for questions from the audience. So please raise your hand if you do have a question and state your name and your organisation. Let's try and keep the questions short and succinct. And if there is a particular person that you'd like to direct your question to, do say that as well. So question over here at the front.
Good morning, I'm Alistair Barnes from Innovate UK. I wouldn't mind talking more about the landlord side. So what more can we do here? How should we approach this? Is it a really big barrier, or is it just a barrier in some cases? What's the best approach?
Okay, so on that point, it's quite complicated. I don't think I've got all morning, but it largely depends on the lease agreement that companies already have. But there are better lease agreements coming through that actually have the flexibilities and those points addressed in some way. It's really about the older agreements. I'd say those ones are where it's get a lawyer to look at it. But there are new agreements certainly available that are better. I think I'll just leave it at that. Does that answer your question?
Can I just add to that point as well? Obviously, from a depot charging scheme that John mentioned before, that's a key element of the application scheme, is making sure that you have landlord approval for a minimum of 3 years. So I think it's going to become more and more prevalent that organisations and hauliers start looking at land lease times. As John mentioned before, you're not going to put something on the ground if you've got 12 months left because you might move new depot behind it. So I think that's going to become part of the sort of key sort of stakeholder questions that obviously operators are going to ask.
Great question. Thanks, Alistair. Anybody else? Over there.
I'm Gerard Llewellyn-Jones from the Mentamon Hydrogen Company, and my question really is this. In the progression towards having gridless or at least grid-challenged depot development, what role could green hydrogen and hydrogen power units play in achieving an energy source for a gridless depot or a partly gridless depot?
I think there's a number of opportunities behind that. I previously worked in the hydrogen sector, so very good question. I think behind that, I think we're looking at, I think it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. I think you say depending on the rural nature of the location, you can use hydrogen gensets from a green hydrogen source that can provide green power, so it will be on a case-by-case basis. It might not be a case for large-scale operators, but certainly when you're looking at remote locations, and certainly hydrogen can potentially play a place there, sorry.
Thank you, Mark. Ellen?
Yeah, it does play a role in storage as well, doesn't it? So it is quite useful for us. We've got a designated flexibility team that look at constraints in specific locations. And we have kind of certain times of day where we need certain assets that are connected to our grid to take demand or generate more electricity. So it certainly has a role to play in storage and moving to a world where we've got more low carbon technologies. It's becoming more and more important to have storage that's able to respond at specific times of day to network constraints to keep it as safe as possible level. So yeah.
I think that, sorry, just quickly, that also reminds as well, there was a project around EV charging with, I think, Westmoreland Farm, that were using hydrogen gensets whilst the grid connection was taking place. So there are cases in the marketplace of where hydrogen can obviously support the industry.
Yeah, so it plugs the gap, so to speak. Next question. Anybody? At the back there. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Lorch, Flexible Power Systems. A question for Ellen, please. So, given the current sort of backlog of DNO site upgrades that have been requested, is there a way in which you prioritise particular sites for an upgrade? And if you do, what are the factors that you use to consider?
So, It depends on a case-by-case basis, so I can't really comment on individual cases, but we are currently going through a period where we're, from a regulatory perspective, every 5 years we have to get more funding from Ofgem. So we're going through that Rio ED3, they call it, to get more investment. And part of the regulation that's developing over the past couple of years is the connections reform. So we are really encouraged to look at sites where there's more a strategic priority to connect, and also, you know, we are kind of by regulation required to kind of treat every customer fairly. So it depends on the specific aspect of a project, whether they are ready to connect. So if you've got land, planning and everything kind of ready to go to get the grid connection, it's moving towards it's moving towards a first ready, first connected solution now. So and that's coming from the Ofgem regulation and the connections reform piece that's run by the UK government. So in terms of prioritising first ready, first connected is the new policy around that.
Thank you. Another great question. We have time for just one more quick question, if there is one. Gentleman here.
Steve Banner on behalf of Motor Transport. To what extent do you think we're going to see in the coming years a wholesale relocation of haulage depots, particularly those owned and occupied by small to medium-sized haulage companies? Because with the best will in the world, if I'm sitting in a family-owned haulage depot that has been in the family since the days when great-granddad ran a Foden steam wagon in the 1920s, it's probably not, I would suggest, going to be suitable for electrification. And I'm probably thinking about moving anywhere because I can't get one of the new longer semi-trailers into it.
Yeah, I can answer this one. So we are starting to see examples already. And so I would say it's quite likely we're going to see more and more of it. We have some purpose-built logistics parks, so a number of them around the country, which are very good for multimodal, so rail hubs near major roads. Some even, as at East Midlands Gateway just last week, which is right by the airports and has road, rail and airport. So I think we're going to see a lot more of this, where logistics hubs pull in logistics companies and even companies that have been around for a long time in a family-run. I don't want to say sheds, but some of them literally are. They may still think, okay, we need to relocate. We need to relocate for power, for practicality reasons. If we look at our company strategy, we need to do this, and part of that strategy is relocation. Thinking about electricity supply, thinking about many things that can be solved at once. So yes, absolutely.
Brilliant, thank you so much. That was a great question to end on. So I'd just like to say a huge thank you to our wonderful panel this morning, to Ellen, to Leo, John and Mark. Thank you so much, absolutely brilliant.